So let's return our attention to the model itself. We're back in a file called Assign Materials, which is just another version of our table family that we've been working on in this chapter. And currently the model appears as a uniform dull gray. It's what I like to call plain old gray cardboard. We would probably like to have a little more control over what our table is actually made from. Materials can be assigned to the elements in our family to give them a more realistic appearance. We have two ways we can do this. We can assign the materials directly on the geometry itself, or we can use a material parameter. So let's take a look at both of these options here in this file. So I'm going to work over here in my 3D view, and I'm going to change my vantage point slightly. I'm just holding down my Shift key and dragging with the wheel. It should be something you're fairly familiar with. And I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. I want to assign some different materials here. So I'm going to start with this little keystone extrusion that we put up on top of the table, and I'm going to assign a material directly to that object. So not via a parameter, I'm just simply going to change the geometry. So like you might expect, you just simply select the object, you come over here to the Properties palette, and you just simply change that property. So here under Materials and Finishes, the material is currently listed as by category. Now by category is just a default setting. So what it's basically saying is, I'm the same material as anything that's assigned to furniture. And that's why we're getting the gray cardboard. So if we just click in this field here, a tiny little browse button will appear. I'll click that. That'll open up the list of materials, which if you're familiar with the list of materials in the project editor, you're probably noticing that this one's a little bit lean. That's by design in the family editor to keep the size of families small and to keep the size of the family templates small. Revit has actually purged out most of the materials, but you can add some back in if you want to, and I've taken the liberty to do that in this file, and in the next movie I'll actually go into the process that I use to do that. But for now we're just going to work with the materials that are here, and I'm going to assign that keystone to this brushed aluminum material. So metal aluminum brushed, click OK. And if I deselect it here in the 3D view, the only real indication that I'll get that I've made that change is that it'll change to a white color because that's the shaded color for that material. So that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Of course, doing it that way, the end user has no control over the material of that keystone. So by assigning it directly to the geometry, I am saying this keystone only comes this way. You can't get it any other way. Now, if you imagine you were paging through a product catalog and the spec sheet for the product in question only made the keystone in that one material, it wasn't an option that you could order differently in the catalog, then that would be a perfectly appropriate way to handle this. But let's say that the legs and the tabletop are a little different. Let's say that when we're looking through that product catalog, there's actually choices. You can choose different kinds of wood maybe for the tabletop and maybe different kinds of metal for the legs. So if that's the case, then what we want to do is set those up as material parameters. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and walk through that step right now. I'm going to start with the extrusion. So I'll select the tabletop. And I'm going to return to the Properties palette, but instead of clicking in the By Category field this time, I'm going to locate this tiny little button here over on the right-hand side of the Properties palette. So when I click on that, we're going to see the Associate Family Parameter dialog appear. Now it currently says that the parameter type is material, and it currently shows me a list that's empty. So we don't have any material parameters currently in this file. But I can click this Add button right here, and then I see what should now be familiar parameter properties dialog box that we've been looking at so far. And you'll notice here that the type of parameter is material, and it's grayed out. That's not something we can change here. And all we have to do is basically give it a name. So I'm going to call this tabletop material. I'm going to assign it as a type-based property because, again, I'm going to assume that I'm taking my cue from a product catalog and that I can either order these legs as bronze or as aluminum, and it would apply to that model number. And so to me, that's more of a type-based parameter. You would choose instance parameter if each table was going to be uniquely manufactured to your specifications. And so if you were going to create one using one kind of wood for the tabletop and another kind of wood for the tabletop, you could choose instance. But that doesn't seem like the best choice for me here in this context. So I'm going to click OK again. And if you deselect, you're not going to see any outward change take place yet. And the reason for that is all we've really done is created a material placeholder. That's essentially what the material parameter is. It's a placeholder. Now, if I reselect the tabletop and I look over here on the properties at the result, the material is now grayed out. We can no longer edit it, and there's a tiny little equal sign on that button. And that's really the only clue that we're going to have in the family editor that we've linked up this parameter with a material property. So I'm going to repeat the process with the legs here. I'll select all 4 legs, click the little icon again, add another parameter, give it a name, make it a type parameter, and again, click OK. So you see that's my parameter designation. Click OK. Again, it'll still stay gray cardboard, but if we go back to family types, you'll now see the 2 parameters that we've just created, tabletop material and leg material. Currently, they're both set to by category, but this is where I could go in and give them a default setting if I want. I can assign the tabletop to wood cherry and the leg to this bronze material. Click OK. And now when I click OK, you're going to see both of those materials get applied to the object. So now when I save the family and I load it into the project, it will have those material assignments by default, but because those are parameters, the end user will be able to make those changes. So let's go ahead and save this and take a look. So I have a version of the office building that we were working with earlier in the course loaded already and minimized down at the bottom of my screen. And so I'm going to go ahead over here and click the Load into Project button, and that will bring that project forward. It'll run the Place Component command, and you'll see that the table is now on my cursor. And I'm going to come over here into this conference room area, and I'm just going to click to place that family. You can't really tell what material it's made out of in this view. I mean, I can certainly click on it, edit type, and you'll see the material designations are here. They're listed here, and we can also see all of that information that we put in the previous few movies. It'd probably be better to actually take a look at it. So let's do one more thing. We'll go and create a camera, stand right here by the door, and kind of look at our table. Just kind of widen the view just a touch here. And let's turn on shading. And you can see the materials are now showing in the view. Now that it's loaded in the view, if my user wanted to select the table and edit the type and click here, because they're in the project environment, you would see the much more robust material list to choose from, and they could reassign the material to just about anything they want. So the way that we set it up back in the family, we just kind of set what we wanted the default material to be, but it's still flexible for the end user to make the change. But notice that there is no way for the end user to change the keystone material. The keystone there on the top of the table is going to stay permanently as that aluminum color because of the way that we assign the material. So those are the 2 ways you can assign materials in the family. You can either assign them explicitly directly to the geometry, or you can assign them as material parameters, which are essentially material placeholders that then can be modified later. In the next movie, we'll look at how we actually imported those materials over into the family editor to start with.